Today on Ag News Daily.
With the cost of land, with the cost of inputs, with the cost of equipment, we really don't want to talk in terms of water management as just draining water, right? We want to manage that resource. We believe at ADS that water is our most valuable resource.
Happy Friday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day for all of our listeners tuning in with us this Friday. Michelle Stengler and I joining remotely today as Tanner's at the National Farm Machinery Show. You just got back from a trade show, Michelle. I'm headed to Asia for a few weeks. We're just in full travel mode here at Ag News Daily.
It's trade show season. Soon it'll be spring, but especially with these cold temperatures, I can't wait for spring.
I certainly am right there with you. It seems like Mother Nature's kind of tricking us with warm temperatures one week and then freezing cold the next. But this week we saw some bitter cold winter storms to much of the Midwest. Heavy snow and freezing rain hit earlier this week, and two more significant systems are expected to keep coming through to this region into the weekend and into next week. While these storms will keep road crews busy, they could also provide some much needed moisture to drought affected areas. So definitely a double-edged sword there. If we look farther south, below average temperatures have settled in, raising some concerns for some uncovered winter wheat acres, which have already had a lot of extreme cold this winter, and conditions certainly are in question. The Midwest this week will see additional snowfall while the South braces for heavy rain and severe storms, and a renewed threat of severe thunderstorms, including isolated tornadoes, could be in the forecast as well this weekend. Rainfall totals over the next 5 days could reach 4 to 8 inches in the southeast, particularly in the Tennessee Valley area. And with already saturated ground, flooding is also a growing concern for that area. Here in the Corn Belt, snow is rapidly spreading west of the Mississippi River, stretching into Nebraska and Iowa. Meanwhile, frigid, mostly dry conditions persist in Minnesota and the Dakotas, with some experiencing temperatures of negative 20 degrees. Looking ahead to the 6 to 10 day forecast, outlooks are predicting near to below normal temperatures and near to above normal precipitation across much of the country. So as we look ahead to the 2025 growing season, soil moisture levels remain low, raising concerns about lingering drought. Eric Snodgrass warns that the western Mississippi Valley, Missouri Valley, and Southern Plains could be most at risk for ongoing dryness, is what he recently told Brownfield Ag News. And I know we're going to catch up with him at Commodity Classic here in just a few short weeks to get more of an extended growing season weather update, Michelle, but that's what we know today.
We'll certainly be watching it. Like you mentioned, it's Valentine's Day, so here's a fun story to kick off this week's Ag News, especially before we share a lot of policy news. But since it's Valentine's Day, let's get to what some ag groups are doing to celebrate. The American Lamb Board has designated February as Lamb Lovers Month, highlighting American lamb as the perfect choice for a special Valentine's meal. Their website offers a variety of festive recipes, from heart-shaped lamb dishes to elegant wine pairings, even tips on pairing lamb with chocolate. Meanwhile, Valentine's Day is also a major event for the floriculture industry, a global multi-billion-dollar sector that includes cut flowers, potted plants, garden plants, and more. If you're buying flowers today, and you're directly supporting this thriving industry in agriculture. In fact, Valentine's Day is one of the biggest holidays for flower sales. In 2019, 28% of Americans spent a total of $1.9 billion on flowers for the occasion. So whether you're celebrating with a gourmet lamb dinner, a fresh bouquet, or both, agriculture plays a big role in making Valentine's Day special. Do you have any fun plans for Valentine's Day, or do anything special, Delaney?
Well, I was just listening to that story thinking, man, we got to get something fun for dinner tonight. So hopefully our listeners are as well. But as we turn to some harder hitting news here ahead of the growing season, as growers are making crop insurance decisions, the University of Illinois Extension has the latest analysis to help guide producer choices. Agricultural economist with the U of I, Gary Schnittke, says in Illinois and likely across much of the Corn Belt, ARC is going to be the better choice over PLC. For corn, soybeans, and wheat, Schnittke explains that ARC County payments are more likely to trigger payments this year and offer larger payouts compared to PLC. However, if market prices drop significantly below the effective reference price, PLC could be the better choice and provide higher payments since it doesn't have the 10% cap that ARC payments do. Among the three crops, the clearest decision is for soybeans, he says, where ARC County is the preferred option. But ARC and PLC farm safety net decisions are due, of course, in March, and farmers should review their options individually for the best fit for their operation.
Talking about now the Farm Bill, the president's tariffs and government restructuring dominated the House Ag hearing earlier this week on the economic crisis in farm country. The hearing fell on the same day President Trump signed a new executive order directing agencies to work with Elon Musk efficiency teams to cut their workforce and sharply limit new hiring. The USDA, which employs nearly 100,000 workers across 4,500 locations worldwide, is among the agencies affected. Top House Ag Democratic Angie Craig raised concerns about how these changes are impacting farmers, saying grant dollars to farmers appropriated by Congress and already under contract with USDA have been frozen. Trade deals with our large trading partners and largest export markets have been threatened. And she also mentioned food grown in America is rotting in a warehouse in Texas. Iowa Congressman Zach Nunn says recent disaster aid helped farmers recover, but it's not a long-term fix. He stated in the hearing it's been 7 years since the Congress passed the Farm Bill, 7 years since we've updated our farm safety net, he says. He also mentioned we need a long-term strategy to strengthen America's food security. Further complicating matters, the closure of USAID has stalled $500 million in food aid, adding some more uncertainty for producers. Ag Economics' John Newton, head of the research firm Terrain, highlighted the financial strain on farmers, stating that since 2022, inflation-adjusted net farm income has dropped by $43 billion, or 26%, to $138 billion in 2025. He summed it up in the hearing by stating, we're witnessing historic volatility in the farm economy. Meanwhile, the fate of the new Farm Bill now results with the Budget Committee tasked with finding billions in savings to fund the president's priorities, which are border security, energy dominance, and extending the 2017 tax cuts. It's really interesting just to see some of the chaos and see some mainstream media outlets cover what's happening with farmers with some of this aid being limited or froze. So we'll continue to follow this issue.
Well, yeah, continuing on that front, Michelle, the USDA has frozen funding on some conservation programs as it undergoes a review, despite assurances from the Trump administration that farmer assistance programs wouldn't be largely affected by government overhaul. According to Reuters, the freeze has a wide-ranging impact, halting everything from cash assistance for ranchers to funding cattle watering systems and cover crop support for corn growers. Contractors for conservation programs have also been affected by the funding freeze. Meanwhile, 2 federal judges ruled last week that the Trump administration lacked the authority to block funds that were appropriated by Congress. Despite this, the administration has continued to freeze on IRA-related spending affecting renewable energy grants at the EPA and Department of Energy. Reports also suggest that federal agencies are now trying to claw back IRA funds and contracts. Also related to the energy conversation this week, a bipartisan group of federal lawmakers introduced legislation on Thursday in both the U.S. House and Senate to once again make a stab at year-round E15 permanent sales nationwide. The bill aims to standardize fuel volatility regulations for ethanol-blended fuels across the country and would override a rule allowing 8 Midwest states to offer year-round E15 beginning in 2025. Additionally, we want to congratulate Brooke Rollins, who was sworn in this week as the 33rd U.S. Secretary of Agriculture by Associate Justice Clarence Thomas in a private ceremony at the Supreme Court. The U.S. Senate confirmed Rollins with a 72-28 vote, And Michelle, I know she is already in office, given her first interview to an ag publication, AgriPulse. And we are looking forward to see what she will do here with the next 4 years of her term.
There's certainly some news there that may be stressful, so stick around, and we have some tips of how to manage that stress a little later on in today's episode. But going on, maybe some more positive news. A new bill aimed at ensuring farm families have access to higher education has been introduced in the U.S. Senate. Iowa Republicans John Lee Erst and Chuck Grassley introduced the bipartisan Family Farm and Small Business Exemption Act, which Grassley says would codify existing education department policy. Farm and small business assets should be exempt from declaring on the free application for federal student aid, he said. He emphasized that many farm families and small businesses are asset-rich but cash-poor. The legislation would restore the original FAFSA exemption for non-liquid assets when determining financial aid eligibility. The bill aims to protect farm families from losing financial aid opportunities due to the high value of their land and equipment assets that aren't easily converted to cash.
Well, we certainly are policy heavy this week. Another act this week, Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia have reintroduced the Promoting Precision Agriculture Act, a bipartisan effort to advance agriculture technology. The proposed legislation aims to expand the use of precision ag tools by encouraging public and private collaboration to develop voluntary interconnectivity standards and enhance cybersecurity protections for farm technology. Supporters say the bill would help farmers and ranchers increase efficiency, improve yields, and protect sensitive data as digital tools become more essential in modern agriculture. So, wrapping up some news there, Michelle, as we head into the 2025 growing season, drainage and water retention, soil moisture, those are probably on the minds of a lot of growers, but it's certainly on the mind of Tim Dahl with Advanced Drainage Systems. Let's tune in to that conversation with Tim now. Well, we're super excited to continue the conversation about drainage and tiling today with Tim Dahl, a regional sales manager for ADS, Advanced Drainage System. And Tim, you are on the road today covering some of the states that are a part of your territory. Excited to learn more about your role with ADS. Before we get into the company background, let's learn a little bit more about your background, if you wouldn't mind starting us off with that.
Absolutely. So I'm a regional sales manager. I cover Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri. I have 7 sales reps that work that territory, and I'm there to assist and help them in any way I can. I'm based out of Buffalo, Minnesota. I've been with ADS just about 20 years now. I started on more in the operations side. I moved over to sales about 10 years ago, and last year I took on this role of regional sales manager.
20 years is a long time, so congratulations on that very well-deserving career, I'm sure. For those of our listeners who are not familiar with ADS, you seem like the perfect person to talk to us a little bit about some of the history, how ADS was started, and what the company looks like today.
So ADS started in 1966, and it was really an ag-based company. And when we started, we were really champions of black corrugated high-density polyethylene pipe, what we commonly know as drain tile today. We really started there in the ag market, really looking to innovate any way we could, just to try to help growers increase their yields.
And what does the company look like over the 20 years that you have worked there? What are some of the big transitions that you've seen in your career lifetime?
So, like I said, we started in agriculture. We've grown really just leaps and bounds since in my 20-year history. So when I started here, ADS was about a $700 million a year company, a national footprint, certainly even at that time. We're currently over $3 billion. We have plants and distribution centers in the U.S., Canada, and I believe a couple in South America. Our headquarters are in Columbus, Ohio, a northwest suburb of Columbus, Ohio, called Hilliard. We are publicly traded. We are on the New York Stock Exchange under the sign WMS, which stands for Water Management Solutions. It really it's been an exciting 20 years just to watch us change and grow. And even though we started as agriculture, we branch into a lot other areas, residential, commercial, aviation, really anywhere where we can use our products to help manage stormwater are the markets that we're in.
I want to go back to something that you just mentioned, Tim, which was WMS, or Water Management System. Tiling is no surprise. It's not a foreign topic to a lot of our listeners at the Ag News Daily podcast, but Water Management System might be a newer term to them. Tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Well, I think, and I'm gonna kind of tie this to the grower, to our audience, right? So I think as we look at the challenges that growers have now, with the cost of land, with the cost of inputs, with the cost of equipment, we really don't want to talk in terms of water management as just draining water, right? We want to manage that resource. We believe at ADS that water is our most valuable resource, and we want to do things to manage that. So how do we get that water off the field, but then store it or hold it back so it can be used at a later time? And not only, and we're not just doing that in agriculture, we're doing that in other facets of our business too. So we really look at it as a total water management system. And that's really our focus, is to drive and innovate products that help us do that.
I love the way you mentioned that, Tim. I'm thinking about managing your water as a resource, because if we think about especially crop farmers managing resources, we talk a lot on our podcast about managing fertilizer and other chemical inputs, but we don't often think about it in the sense of managing our water resources. How do you think growers, do you hear growers referring to that when you're out in the field, or is that a little bit of a mindset shift?
Well, I still think I still think people still talk about it in terms of drainage, right? But we really look at it as managing that resource. And I'll give you an example. If your field is in an oversaturated state, it's really difficult to manage your inputs because, quite frankly, the plant isn't using your inputs because it can't get oxygen to the roots. It can't get a number of other things. So we look at that as it needs to be part of the grower's kind of overall plan on how he's going to manage his crop during that growing season.
Absolutely. And, as we've talked about on the podcast previously, we know agriculture is in a little bit of a tumultuous state as we head into this new year. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing impacting farmers in the territory that you cover?
I mean, there's a lot of things for producers that are out of their control. Commodity prices, crop prices, is certainly probably front and center as being the biggest challenge right now to most of the producers. Land prices certainly have become a challenge. The cost of inputs, the cost of equipment to put those inputs on, all of those things, I think really challenge producers to become as resourceful as possible to make sure that every dollar they spend, they're getting back in yield. And quite frankly, I think tile's a big part of that.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, too, as we think about 2025, starting to see growers maybe consider some different decisions, maybe investing less in inputs or just finding ways to cut costs. What do you see as far as the sentiment go this year toward tiling and drainage system?
Well, in particular in my area, I live in central Minnesota. So southern Minnesota and most of Iowa saw absolutely historic rainfalls last spring. Really, when I say historic, maybe, in some areas, the rainiest season they've ever on record. We have a plant in Fairmont, Minnesota. I think they saw something like 37 inches of water last spring, right? So when you put that into context, all of that, all of that needs to be taken into account when it comes to, can we get the crop in? Can we get the crop out? After we get it in and it starts to grow, are we losing it? And again, all of those decisions are decisions that growers and things that growers have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe we're just about maybe 2 months out from planting, but leading up into planting season here, what are some activities that are happening out in your area now to prepare for this spring?
Well, I think, we used to say we were a seasonal business. We're not. As soon as the season, what we call the season, is over, we start planning for next year. I think growers in particular, they're deciding, what crops to plant. They're buying their inputs. They're doing all that last fall. I think now for us, we have big growers that are identifying crops or identifying fields that maybe they want to tile. If they plant wheat, for instance, something that comes off in July or August, that gives contractors more time to get in the field and do their work. One of the challenges that the tile industry has especially in Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota, is we have a very small window of time to actually get the drainage done, actually get the pipe installed. So if we're lucky, we get a couple weeks in the spring. If we're lucky, we get a couple months in the fall. We've got to maximize efficiency in all those areas. And I think so farmers are planning what they want to do. We're seeing more and more farmers allow contractors maybe to put some main lines in on the headlands during the summer. We're even seeing some growers that are just saying, go ahead and go through the crop. We'll take whatever loss it is, but we've been wanting to get this field tiled for a number of years and we haven't been able to get it done. So we're just going to bite the bullet and get it done. So I think that's where the planning as far as what your tile plan for the year comes from.
Tim, if we have any listeners that are tuning in with us and thinking, man, I really should get some tiling done for this year, have they missed the boat?
No. Again, contractors will start to fill their schedules this time of year. I think especially in that area that I mentioned earlier that had all the rain last year, I think those contractors are feeling very good about their schedules and the amount of work they have. But no, certainly there's opportunities to put new projects on the books.
Fantastic. Tim, well, before I let you go, how can our listeners learn more about ADS or some of the things we've talked about today?
You can certainly follow ADS on social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, or you can go to our website, which is www.adspipe.com.
Perfect, Tim. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Certainly appreciate your time, especially joining us from the road.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Well, what a great conversation between you and Tim. Again, into some more ag news, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, CBA, has outlined its 2025 policy priorities, focusing on producer profitability and regulatory reform. Speaking at CattleCon 2025, newly elected NCBA President Buck Warvine, a Nebraska cattleman, emphasized the group's commitment to working with the Trump administration and Congress to expand opportunities for the industry. Warvine says NCBA will advocate for passage of a long-term farm bill and push to extend the critical tax provisions in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that expire at the end of the year. The organization is also pushing back against regulatory burdens, citing concerns over Endangered Species Act listings and the Corporate Transparency Act. Warvine argues that government overreach has hindered conservation efforts increased legal costs, and created uncertainty for cattle producers. With major policy battles ahead, the NCBA plans to stay engaged in Washington to ensure cattle producers' voices are heard. So, like mentioned, there's a lot of trade shows going on, a lot of organizations choosing their policy priorities with their members.
Well, we saw that Farmers Business Network has published its 2025 annual ag chemical pricing report, which is a report designed to help farmers with insight and see some transparency behind how purchasing is set up and may impact purchasing decisions for their operation. The report is based on proprietary data from FBN, along with U.S.-based farmer-submitted invoices detailing ag chemical purchases made from June 1st of 2024 to January 15th of 2025. This year's analysis covers 1,300 plus price points across 26 states and 122 different ag products, including insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, and adjuvants. While the data shows overall price decreases, there's a notable price inconsistency at the national and regional levels compared to previous seasons. One major takeaway: tariffs are expected to increase prices on a range of ag chemicals, particularly glyphosate, glufosinate, and 2,4-D. The U.S. reliance on imported active ingredients for these herbicides means tariffs, particularly the 10% tariffs on Chinese imports, could have a significant impact. In fact, in 2024, 99% of glyphosate, 85% of glufosinate, and 49% of 2,4-D, 100% of atrazine, and a couple other products there are sourced directly from China. Despite the tariff concerns, 2025 national prices are trending down for nearly every product analyzed by FBN, with the exception of a small increase for some new items like Outlook. Farmers are urged to consider both pricing trends and potential tariffs as they make some of those pricing and input decisions ahead for the upcoming growing season. Michelle, as we think about some other news impacting the farm economy here, I don't know if you've been to the grocery store recently to buy eggs, but consumers are noticing this as well. Since February of 2022, more than 157 million birds have been affected by HPAI, the highly pathogenic avian influenza, with cases reported now in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. We did see a slowdown in 2024. However, we're seeing the outbreak resurge here this month and last month. USDA's APHIS has confirmed 149 new cases across 32 states in the last 30 days alone. And as we talked about, the ongoing crisis is contributing to a large spike in eggs. People have been taking to social media. I saw a meme mentioning this year you're going to have to dye something else for your Easter egg celebration, Michelle. So not a great time to maybe be switching up the diet, leaning into some more egg-based proteins.
It's certainly interesting as we look into diets too, with that being an affordable, it's still an affordable cost for milk at protein, but super interesting. But we hope this time of the year you are taking time to check in on yourself. Whenever your busy time of the year might be, we have some tips for you about mental health from a recent presentation at the North American Conservation and Drainage Expo that our team member Tanner Winterhoff attended. The presentation from Purdue University Extension explains how farmers were more exposed to factors affecting mental health. Let's hear how Angela Zorg, a health and human sciences educator, and Abby Heidenreich, agricultural and natural resource educator, of why they think that might be.
When I'm saying mental health issues, I don't necessarily mean a diagnosable mental health condition. So most of the people in my private practice that I see are just stressed the heck out. I don't give them a diagnosis. They're just stressed out and they need to know how to manage that stress to move on to the next day. So we're not necessarily talking about anxiety disorder or depression or anything like that. We're really talking about some of those things, but we are talking about stress, which I think we can probably all relate to. Dr. Michael Roseman was a rancher in the 80s and a psychologist. And he came up with the term, the agrarian imperative. And what this says is farmers are an endangered species and we need them for our sustenance. We need to take care of our farmers because no one else does. If farmers don't care for themselves, if we don't care for farmers, they can't care for us. So Dr. Michael Roseman, when you cultivate the land, when you raise your livestock, and that is a part of your family history, it is ingrained in your identity. If Purdue fired me tomorrow, I could go get another job. It would be stressful for me and I wouldn't like it and I would be really sad. But the long-term impact on my family is not going to be a lot.
On the flip side of that, if my father or my brother had to sell the farm tomorrow, there would be long-lasting effects on the mental health, the family health, as well as it's not just as easy as going and getting another job. There is a lot more involved in the farm. There's a lot more emotionally invested in the farm, and there is that identity piece that plays into it.
So we're really happy that Dr. Michael Roseman, he is still alive and he still does research. I have spoken with him and he is still doing some of the research that he did because, again, we're really seeing the same kind of increased mental health issues that we really did see in the 80s when he coined this term.
So this slide focuses on that farmer identity that I mentioned. When farmers are involved in some farmers do have jobs off the farm. So their entire identity may not be wrapped up in the farm, but that's where their heart is, okay? A lot of farmers that we talk to, they farm, that is their primary occupation. A lot of places are businesses and agribusinesses that provide services to farmers also operate in a very similar way. Your identity is wrapped up in this need to provide, which that's a very natural instinct, is the need to provide for your family, for others. But we see that a lot more prominently in our agricultural communities. That's what makes our agricultural communities great, is that they care for each other. We look out for our neighbors, and we always are on the lookout for people that we can help, right? People that we can feed, that we can nurture, and that we can help grow. But that drives a lot of us to push past our own problems in order to care for others, right? It kind of allows us to kind of put it out of our minds. Growing up, it would drive my mom crazy because when we would have a big snowstorm, my dad would go out on the tractor and plow all the neighbors' driveways before he would plow our own. And that was something that would just drive her crazy. But he had this need to provide for others before himself. A very honorable quality. However, when it comes to dealing with your own mental health and taking care of yourself, it makes you, in the grand scheme of things, a lot less able to care for your own family when you can't pour from an empty cup, basically.
Additionally, Abby Heidenreich shares tips and resources about how to get past the stress.
It's okay to lean on your village. These are things that we have emphasized, and it's important that not necessarily to have a full-on therapy session with a friend of yours, but just to have someone that's a listening ear, right? Listening can be the first step to really just feeling better. Oh, I just needed to get that off my chest, right? That helps a lot. And we need to also recognize whose villages we are in, right? How can we be better listeners for others? A lot of times when we do mental health talks, we go into a room of farmers and they all are like, oh, well, we don't need this. We're all doing great. Like, that's great. Happy for you. I'm glad that you are perfect on your mental health journey. However, someone that you know may need this information. So I'm asking you to please pay attention when it turns out the person that needed it might be them, right? So one of the things that we do with the Farm Stress team is we provide resources in a variety of different formats and ways. We have a lot of printed resources you can get on our website. We have PSA videos that a lot of people can use and watch to gain inspiration. We also have a podcast that I help host where we interview people in the ag industry and beyond and talk about their experiences and hopefully provide some insights that people can pull from in their own lives to learn how other people cope with some of the obstacles of everyday life.
Well, thanks, Tanner, for that content. Looks like a great educational presentation you attended. Delane, what's happening in markets?
Well, this week we saw the February WASDE report drop, which was fairly neutral to bullish for the grains. One slight surprise was the USDA did lower ending stocks for wheat, and the report also cut Argentinian and Brazilian corn production estimates, but left soybean production unchanged. The Trump administration is also working on a reciprocal tariff package that would in effect match all tariffs that countries place on the United States. This is on top of the 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports that President Trump announced earlier this week on Monday. And President Trump has basically given his staff directive to start looking at the best approach to some of these tariffs. He has asked members of his administration to begin analyzing costs of trade on a by-country basis around the world. He said these costs of trade will include import tariffs, any sort of safety or market regulation that may limit U.S. access, and take into consideration any regulatory hurdles and value-added taxes. So going to be doing some research there. He's given his team the deadline of April 1st for this assessment and individual tariff plans by country. So we'll see here if they can, in fact, make that April 1st deadline. But in other international news, export sales remain strong this week, highlighting a large number of corn sales headed to Mexico, Japan, and South Korea. Soybean exports were at a marketing year low, and we will likely see that trend continue as the South American crop begins to come online now, Michelle. So that is a quick look at the news and markets for today on this Valentine's Day Friday.
And as we look into the next few weeks, you'll be traveling. Where are you going, and who are you all going with?
Yes, I'll be headed to Vietnam and South Korea with the Iowa Corn Growers Association. I've got my wireless mics packed, and I'm hoping to bring a couple of quick updates from the ground in Southeast Asia. So hopefully bring some updates for our listeners. And then right when we get back, we head to Commodity Classic. So we've got a busy few weeks ahead of us. But listeners, if you're going to be at Commodity Classic, or maybe you're not going to make it, but there's a company or a group you really want us to chat with, please shoot us a note. You can find us on all social media sites, Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Shoot us a note. Let us know you're going to be there, or just make sure and come say hi if you are there, boots on the ground in Denver. But Michelle, with that, what do you say we let the people go?
Let's let them go.